the hatred that was in my heart and the feelings I had towards her and people that were involved and all that, I had a really bad hell-bounded possibly issue. I just knew this. I don't even know how I knew it. But I would say for anyone that's going through anything hard, whether it's marriage, friendships, whatever it may be, the only roadblock in your life, and it only hurts you, is that you haven't forgiven that person. Because that's the only thing that will constantly come up in your life that you don't understand why you can't go forward. What's wrong with me?
Welcome to Along the Way. I'm John Matarazzo, your host and fellow traveler. Thank you for joining me along my way as I try to become more like Jesus every day. The goal of Along the Way is to identify the moments in life that Jesus really is walking with us and trying to get our attention. But just like the disciples along the way to Emmaus, we are missing those moments that our hearts are burning within us. I want us to be able to identify those moments, learn from others, and apply those lessons to our lives so that we don't miss the blessings that God has for us along the way in our life's journey. Miracles do happen in relationships. Jay and Jolin Morris are proof of that. Their marriage ended, but God wasn't finished with their journey together. As they share their story, you will be amazed to hear how God inserted himself into their lives and restored their marriage. I'll get to our conversation in just a moment, but I want to thank you for listening to Along the Way. All of my episodes and social links are available at my website, alongtheway.media. All the links from this episode will be in the show notes. And now, here's my Along the Way conversation with Jay and Jolin Morris. Jay and Jolin Morris, it's great to have you guys on Along the Way. Thanks for being here. Actually, thanks for letting me come and invade your space. It's nice to be able to do an interview in person. I've been doing so many via Zoom or Riverside now, and everything's been online. So it's great to actually see some longtime friends that we haven't seen each other in a while, but in person. So thanks for giving me some time to share your stories.
Yeah, thank you, Jay, Matt.
Sure.
We
Thanks
appreciate
for having
it.
us.
Good to see your beautiful face.
Likewise. So we go back to my days in Youth with a Mission, probably, oh gosh, what year was that? Probably 2008, 2007, something like that.
Yep.
We started going to the same young adults group that was where the Youth with a Mission Center was in Pittsburgh, actually about an hour south of the city in Bell Vernon. The church that we were connected with, they had a young adults group. And so I started going to that on Thursday nights, and you guys started coming there too. And we had some really, really great times at the Joyce and Simeon's house.
Oh,
and
yes.
Man, really, really awesome to just be able to learn about other people's lives and to really kind of do life together outside of the ministry that I was already a part of. So how did you guys get to become part of that church and then that small group?
Well, I tell you what, I met Chobi basically at the church, and it was I was a new Christian at that point in time,
Okay.
and I don't even know if I was even saved at that point in time. But going to church, obviously, the reason why we got to the church was that my wife and I, Jolyn, we had some big complications in our marriage,
Okay.
and so basically, we tried every other avenue except, going to church and seeking God and not even knowing what that even meant. But as we got to the church and then I saw this guy named Chobi with his arms raised up and he had some tattoos. And I'm thinking, well, I got tattoos. I've never seen a guy with tattoos like raise his hand. I'm always thinking, I was involved in church where I just always thought that you had to be perfect and
Sure.
Tie and suit and all that. So this was different. And
So you grew up going to a church where everything was very formal.
Yeah, I ended up growing up in a Catholic church.
Okay.
And so my perception of that was, once you start wearing a suit and a tie and you get your life together, then I guess God would deal with you better, or whatever it may be. So I had kind of had that brain fog of that, but this was different. So we connected somehow with Chobi, and then that led into what you were just talking about with being at Joyce and Simeon's house.
Right. So that's Chobi's parents, actually.
Yeah, Chobi's parents, and it was a pretty cool experience because at that time, Jolyn and I were like, oh man, this crazy Christian thing going, that's our mindset because we're very worldly at this point in time, man. We're still in our life at trying to figure things out, man. We were pretty broken. And, but it was a point though that God was breaking us. So we were able to figure, like, I remember just going there every Wednesday and going, oh, I hope they don't ask me to pray, because I really don't know how to pray, because I was still in that format of like, this religious mindset. But yeah, I mean, it was cool because it broke a lot of barriers to where, we did learn how to pray there. We understood what that meant, and everyone was open to that. And we saw a lot of good things happening. So we grew a lot there.
Yeah, absolutely. Jolin, go ahead. Yeah, you were going to say something.
We also learned how to take our shoes off when we walk into somebody's house. It's Joyce and Simeon's tradition.
Yeah,
right. So we followed it.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. Joyce and Simeon. Simeon is of Chinese ancestry, and so he does they do a lot of work in Asia as missionaries, and so they definitely taught us about the Chinese tea etiquette and all kinds of other fun things with that. So, but Jolin, how did you grow up? Because Jay just talked about growing up in a, understanding about church as something that is very formal, and, you have to get your life together. What was your perception of church before you started coming?
Well, I grew up, I would say, in a Presbyterian church. Early on, my biological father and my mom were married. He was Catholic. My mom was married in a Catholic church, and they had gotten a divorce. And so we just stopped going to the Catholic church. It was kind of one of those things where she wasn't really welcome at the church anymore. So we started going with my grandparents to just a little church right upside here. And you stop.
That's okay.
Okay. So anyway, it was just a small church. Everybody in this town went to that church. So it was a Presbyterian church. I grew up mainly going there and to like vacation Bible school there with my cousins. And really it was just here's and there's. I mean, it wasn't every single week.
So you were kind of loosely aware about Jesus and faith a little bit, but it wasn't something you ever considered was your own?
No.
Okay.
No, I knew that heaven and hell existed. I know, now that I think about it, I think I just assumed that I was going to go to heaven when I was a kid. Like, I didn't really think anything other than that. Yeah. But I guess it was just the way that I grew up. My grandpap was more of the Bible reader, which is my mom's dad. He read the Bible a lot of times. But my grandparents never really spoke to me about the Bible. I just knew it was something that he did, which is now kind of odd that I'm older and I think about it. Like, why didn't you ever talk to me about it? But I can see in how they raised their kids and how they lived their life. Yeah. Like my grandmother, she was a giver. So like she always, I don't know, she just had there was something different about my grandparents. And obviously it was Jesus. They just never really shared the gospel.
Yeah. So there was a desire there. You just didn't know how to cross that threshold and make it become your own.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, God just kind of picked me up and threw me across the line when I was about 28.
Okay.
He had enough at that point.
Yeah, well, I want to definitely hear that story, but I think something else happened before that point where the two of you guys actually met. So how did you guys meet? And what happened after that?
Do you want the real version or do you want his version?
Oh, I want the real version. And I'll take his version too. We can kind of compare notes.
First, and then I'll tell you where he lied. No.
All right. All right, Jay, go ahead.
So basically, it was my senior year. And
of high school?
Of high school. Her mother was a teacher.
Okay.
So she was one of my teachers growing up. And so, like I said, I was the guy that, I was the party guy. I was the guy that was just known to have a good time. And, and so her, obviously being a teacher, those kids. Well, I'm that kid, right? So the last day of school, I see her in the hallway because she's coming to, I guess, the last day with her mom to, hang out, whatever. And I noticed her and I was like, wow, this is a good looking girl. I like her, this is, so I guess she said something about, I said, hey, you want my school picture or something like that, which I don't remember that. That's the lie she's probably just talking about, but I guess I might have did that. So we'll just, we'll let her win that one. So anyways, we ended up seeing each other in the hallways, and there was a connection for both of us, obviously, and then so she was going to end up going to the same party, graduation party that night. So
did you guys already go to the same school? You just didn't know each other?
I never met her. And she's got an amazing story about when, what?
Ninth grade.
Ninth grade. Tell the story right now, because we'll just go into it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. So in ninth grade, I was bullied a lot in school. And in ninth grade, they would say like stuff like, oh, you're never going to have a boyfriend, and all this stuff. And
that's really mean.
Well, I mean, yeah, but, I was different. Like, I didn't care what anybody said to me. So they didn't hurt my feelings. Like, I never got my feelings hurt easily when I was younger. I get my feelings hurt now that I'm older. But I feel like before Christ, I didn't get my feelings hurt. Sure. After, like, you become more aware of how you're supposed to. Okay. Not even how you're supposed to act, but how you want to act, I guess you could say.
She's saying she was demon possessed.
Yeah,
that's what I'm getting.
Well, which would lead me to why I met you.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's talk about that.
Keep on going with this story, because this is good.
Okay, so then... So they were like, I said, I already have a boyfriend, which was a lie. I said, he goes to Jefferson Morgan, where my mom teaches. Okay. They're like, oh, yeah, well, let's see a picture of him. I'm like, well, I'll have to bring the yearbook tomorrow so I could show you. So I went and I looked through the cutest guy in all of the yearbook, and it was him. Okay. And so when I went the next day, I was like, oh, yeah, see, right here, that's my boyfriend. I didn't even know his name. I had to look over and count 1, 2, 3 over. And I was like, Jay Morris.
There you go.
Him.
And remember, she's a county away and 3 or 4 schools away. Sure. So she goes to a totally different school.
The only reason I had a yearbook is because my mom's a teacher in that school district.
Yep. So it kind of enabled the lie, being that this is pre-internet,
this is
believable.
Pre-Facebook,
they
left me alone.
All that stuff. Yeah, okay.
Because back then he had long blonde hair. I know
he had hair.
It's funny. Yeah.
So it's just crazy because the power. See, for me,
I manifested it.
Yeah. Because listen. I've read a lot of success books, right? Whether they're a Christian success book or a non-Christian success book, they all have the same common denominator. But if you look at the Bible is basically the power of what comes out of our lips, power of life and death at the tip of the tongue. Watch what you say. So I never knew that, but I did know that the success people always said, speak what you want, write it down, write your goals, your dreams. It's pretty ironic that she points to this picture, because I see this a lot even in my life today, that when these things are happening, there's just things happening, and I can't explain how. But anyways, back to the story. I see her on the last day. Obviously, we go to this party, and we ended up just hanging out that night, and it was a great night. And so I'm thinking, I really like this girl. Well, I had a girlfriend at that time, so
it wasn't so great later.
Yeah, so I get up in the morning, I get a phone call, and I thought it was my girlfriend, and so I called her my girlfriend's name, and it was her, and she goes, "Excuse me," da 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 da. She's like yelling at me, and I'm thinking, dude, I'm not taking this stuff. I just hang up on her, boom, gone. Like, I'm not. You're done. Like, I'm not dealing with this. So we went our separate ways for many. I was a senior. I think what was it, about a good year and a half later, maybe? What?
No.
What?
Oh, yeah.
No, longer than that. Well, no, I was a senior. What were you? 11th grade?
Yeah. No. 10th. I graduated in 97.
So 2 years. So yeah, it was a good 2 years later, right?
Okay.
So I decided, I did my first business venture. Buddy of mine, we found a location to sell Christmas trees. So we ended up selling 200 Christmas trees. We didn't know if we were going to sell one, but we made enough money to go down to Florida, where some of my family had been down in Fort Lauderdale, and then he had some friends down in Tallahassee or wherever. So we were camping out in our cars on a campground. We had nothing. It was fun. But on the way back, after a couple of months, I'm riding through the big hills of West Virginia. I don't know if you've ever done that ride. It's very real hilly.
Yeah.
It's probably 3:00 in the morning. And I'm telling you, I was in the middle of West Virginia, like no man's land.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you break down, you're in trouble.
Right.
Even if you're on the highway. So
the only person coming to save you is probably Bigfoot.
Something. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. I'm not seeing any cars at this time. You know, it was pretty freaky. But so I just remember I'm driving on the road and then this just power hits me of her, like this man. I wonder what she's doing. I wonder how she's been. Man, I'd really like to talk to her again. And I was like, I don't know where it came from. Obviously, we know it's God now, but then no. Yeah. But so I get home, and probably early. I probably had another 8 hours still. But I get home. I go to my best friend's house. Now we lived in this little cul-de-sac area. Mm-hmm. And so I went over just a couple of houses around. I saw him and saying, "Hey, what's up, man? Oh, good. It's good. Nice to see you. Yeah, it's been a long time, a couple months." He has a girlfriend. Well, his girlfriend is her best friend.
Okay.
I don't know anything.
Right.
So she goes, "Hey, I saw Jay today. He was looking pretty good. He was tan. He was like, da-da-da." She's like, "I don't, whatever." So somehow, I just found out that, well, I don't even know, really, to be honest. But we ended up at her apartment, or her friend's apartment, and she happened to be there.
I probably should take over.
Okay. Yeah.
I probably should take over.
Probably, yeah.
So I didn't want anything to do with him.
Right, because the last thing that you heard was him cussing you out over the phone. Is that correct?
Yes, pretty much.
I didn't cuss out.
No, he didn't.
I didn't say no verbal words like that. It was just like,
no, I think it was the other way around. I cussed you out.
Yeah, okay. Something like that.
And then you hung up on me.
Yeah.
There was a hang up.
But I wasn't going to do it.
My cuss word was this: click.
Okay.
It was what I said before that made you use it.
Gotcha.
But so she calls me up and she says what he said, she says, and I was like, okay, and like I do not want to talk to him. Mm-hmm. He's a big jerk. I don't know. She's like, "Oh, come on. We can like go on a double date." I'm like, "I am not dating him. You can forget it." Well, my friend set me up. So she tells him. Uh-huh. So I go over to her apartment. We were going to go get dinner and whatnot. So I went over there to get ready because that's what girls do. So she says, "I got to go to the store." I said, "Okay, I'll go with you." She's like, "Aren't you going to get ready?" And I'm like, "We're not leaving until," and she said, "Well, I'm just going right back and I'm coming right back." I said, "Oh, okay, fine." I didn't even think anything of it until I hear somebody pull in. I thought it was her coming back from the store. Mm-hmm. And then I hear a car door. I'm like, that's weird. It didn't sound like my friend's car, So I look out the window. Here he is. I'm like, I am going to choke her.
Yeah.
Now, there's no cell phones then, so I couldn't even call and yell, So he comes up and knocks on the door, and I open the door, and he says, "Hey, Nikki said you wanted to see me." I said, "Well, Nikki lies because I didn't want to see you, so you can leave." He goes, "Oh, come on. Now you know you want to see me." I'm like, I definitely don't.
I think Nikki was telling the truth.
Yeah.
And so
for sure.
He came in and, he did his whole business proposal of dry wash, waterless car wash. He won me over by saying, "Hey, I like your rings. You want me to clean them for you? What about your earrings? I can show you what this product can do." So he gave me a whole an
actual sales pitch,
not a demonstration sales pitch. Oh, yeah, I had the product.
Of cleaning my jewelry.
Entrepreneurs always have their product with them.
And from that day on, we never were separated.
Yeah, we never looked back. Yeah, we never looked back, really. Yep.
Wow. So,
and I had a girlfriend for like 4 or 5 years at the same time. And then I was just like but I was really tired of her, it was like really bad. It wasn't good. It wasn't like close thing, but it was like, I just remember calling her or she called me. She's like, "Hi, I'm at the beach." I'm like, "Yeah, well, that's all right. You can stay at the beach." I said, I actually found a new girlfriend or something. I was pretty harsh because it wasn't bad. And she's like, "Well, what do you mean?"
Yeah. Just making sure anybody that forgot that fact that's listening, this is pre-Jesus.
Don't work it this way. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
We don't recommend it.
No.
Yeah. So, and I was like, I don't know, 20 or 19, 20, I don't know, something like that. But yeah. So yeah, basically I called it off with my other girlfriend, which that's respectable, so I didn't want to have 2 girlfriends at once. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was it. And then it was done. We never looked back. So.
Yeah. So you guys got married. Yes.
Yes.
Well, pre-Jesus.
1 year after that, or how long? How long was it?
90
Pretty quick.
99, we got married, but we didn't get married because we wanted to get married. Really.
Okay. Sure.
We got married because I got pregnant. And so that was in summer of 98.
Okay.
And I lost the baby in December of 98. And we got married in February of 99, but we got married because we were getting married because of the baby.
Sure.
But we ended up still getting married, even though there was no baby anymore.
Yeah. So what made you guys actually decide to actually go through with getting married? Because you could have easily just called it off at that.
And he did.
I did. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I kind of did. Yeah, I did. I was like,
he kind of had a panic freak out attack.
I kind of felt like, oh, great, I'm not tied down anymore. I'm young. Because you always hear the stories when you're younger. You're like, just don't get tied down and get you caught. You know, you don't want to have a kid. You know, that's.
Like what you tell your daughter.
I was preached that, and then I'm like, oh, this is my life. I actually did that mistake and that mess up, you know.
Right.
But then when it was like, oh, it's not there anymore, I don't have to get married. I can, you know. And then I don't know. There was just a big conviction that came over me, which I didn't even know what conviction was.
It was your aunt.
And then so you look back. Look back at that, and you go, wow, God was there. He was there, you know, showing you just the plan. Like it was, and I just knew that, like, I can't do this. Like I wouldn't even be happy with who I would be as a person.
Yeah.
And I just felt like, oh, I was going to marry her, but now I'm not. Like, wow, what a jerk. You know, I'm just like, I'm insensitive, you know, whatever. So kind of everything was hitting me, and it was God, like really the spirit, man, just pretty much punched me a little bit here and there.
Well, your aunt, his aunt, who lives in Florida, when he was down there prior to the driving home thing through West Virginia, he was down there with his aunt, and he actually got saved in their church.
Okay.
His aunt was a big Christian, you know, big Christian family. He actually got saved there before he even came home. But so when she kind of got wind that he kind of called it off, she had made a phone call to him, and she said, why was she good enough for you to marry with a baby, but she's not good enough for you to marry without one? Wow. And he was kind of like, oh, yeah.
And so remember too, like even when and I forgot about that. It's good to mention that I did get saved. She invited me up to the altar and whatever that meant, you know, and so I went up there, and you know, and she basically, I said, yeah, I definitely would like that. That'd be good, you know, and just by faith, you know, saying the prayer of salvation, obviously God started, you know, really working what he had for me, which is that little bit, that mustard seed obedience, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So as I look back, and that's the same thing. It's a while now, because I reflect back. It's kind of cool having this podcast right now, because I'm putting it together now to where, like, you know, driving down the road that night, I was telling you, in West Virginia, and I'm scared and I'm nervous, and I'm like, oh man, if I break down, it's 3:00 in the morning. And then all of a sudden this thing of her, you know, her imagery of her, who she is and the person, was just like, wow, where did that come from? You know, and you realize, wow, that was the byproduct of going up, and you know, God starting to now pour it on, you know, just starting to open things up.
Your life was starting to change because you made your first step to be with Jesus.
Obviously that had to be the truth. Because
that's really cool. That is really cool. So that first step leads to the next step and the next step, and there's some back steps that you've made as well, but then you kind of, you know, you still headed in the right direction eventually. So you guys did get married, and was it a happy marriage leading early on?
No.
Not really. I mean, yes and no.
I mean, there
good
were
times and bad times. Just
that's what
I think it's a lot for two people that are that young, 19 or 20, 18 or 19. I'm 21. You know, it's like, wow, a lot of things change quick.
Right.
You know, I still want to go out with my friends, hang out. I still want to party because I'm still in that mode. You know, I'm not going to church. We're not, you know, even though I got saved when I was 19, I wasn't obedient at all.
Yeah. So you guys got married in 1999, and then, so you said 10 years later, roughly 10 years later. So that's around the time that I met you guys.
Yes.
At the young adults group at the church. And so I didn't quite realize that all this stuff that we're going to be talking about was happening at that same time that we were getting to know each other and becoming friends. So tell me about what was happening.
So basically we lived a pretty, just a worldly life, a marriage. And it wasn't like terrible, but we were disconnected, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so one night,
and at this point you're in business.
I'm in business.
I'm in business.
Yep. She's got her own hair salon.
I have my own hair salon. I was never really like a partier or go out to a bar, even not saved. That just wasn't where I was at. We were totally opposite in that spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
I was always the one fighting not for you to go and stuff like that.
Okay.
So that created a lot of tension in the marriage. And so I had a hair salon. A lot of girls my age coming in, single, inviting me to go places. I had a very big salon in Bell Vernon. So it was the go-to salon in the Mon Valley. Everybody.
What was it called?
Ooh La La.
Ooh La La.
Mm-hmm. And I had 3-4 girls working for me at the time.
So this is not people just coming into your basement and you're cutting hair. Like this is a full-on business.
We're talking a couple thousand a month in overhead.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so things were good. I was making lots of money. I was taking trips to New York for hair and, studying and training with the best of the best. And things were good. But then things started getting out of hand because then, I started hanging out with clients after work. We would go across the street. There was a small bar over there. And I didn't really go over there to drink. I'd go over there to eat with them, but they drank. And I usually was the one that was not drinking. But just got caught up in that type of life. He was doing his thing, going with his buddies. And, he had the pawn shop, but we were kind of living separate lives.
Yeah.
And, it just kind of went downhill. And then probably, I don't know how long after that, I had an affair. And and everything just exploded.
Okay.
I was living with it and not saying anything. Happened to be one of his very good friends that was kind of manipulating the situation and telling me things that he was saying and doing and kind of fueling my already fire of just not being happy, and I figured out it was all a lie, but at that point I was at the crossroads where either, it was eating me alive. It was the biggest mistake of my life. And so I sat him down and I told him.
You sat down the guy with Jay.
Did we sit down or what? I think.
No, we sat in the living room.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was for some reason we were like in the bedroom talking about it. Okay.
So Jay, what was going on in your brain whenever she told you about this?
Oh my, it wasn't good, man. It was like, I basically thought I was going to be killing some people.
Did she tell you who it was at that point?
Well, she didn't want to tell me. And I basically said, you better tell me or you might not be living. So you have really no choice. Because I was serious. I might've killed her, at that, maybe not, maybe I don't know.
Oh, I know. You were very,
I was
crazy.
A high strung person. You gotta remember, the reason why I live in PA is that I got caught up in gangs when I was in Florida. My parents didn't know about it. So they got me from that city boy life back down to the country in Clarksville, PA. So went one extreme to the other. So my mentality is that,
Okay.
And then, so I've always liked fighting. I was always in karate, then wrestling. And then I wasn't done fighting. So I started doing MMA and jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and all that, started cage fighting and all that. And so my mentality at this point in time, I was a full-fledged, cage fighter that really wanted to do something big with that. And so my mentality, of just always being, because you got to remember, it's like fighting dogs, right? Like if they're always around, that's what they become. Well, I'm fighting 5 days a week. I'm constantly in the gym, and so I'm getting beat. I'm always coming home with black eyes and whatever. And so I'm just at that point in time, I'm nuts. And you get a couple of drinks in me, and then it's even crazier. So I was just enraged. Yeah. So now I'm basically, I told her, and she finally I tell her, I said, I'm going to call up my best friend, and I'm going to I'm going to get him and we're going to find this dude. And I don't know, maybe I'll kill him. I don't know. And then she was like, I can't tell. I'm like, you better tell me. So when she ends up telling me, it's that guy that I'm going to call up.
Oh, wow.
That's going to have my back.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So
you probably felt very alone at that point.
I don't think alone was even a feeling. I think it was just like, I'm going to kill him and I'm going to find him. And I remember calling him and basically saying, and he was like, hey, meet me anywhere you want to meet me. I'm not going to even fight. I'll put my hands behind my back. You can beat me to a pulp, because he knew he messed up and he knew who I was. I don't, it was really bad. But anyways, from that point on time, man, it was like the first time in my life that I remember being by myself and I just cried. And I cried just tears of just that, but it was tears of just everything. Things like I felt like stories from my life, like things that my dad might have did to me, the vacations. My dad was he was a Vietnam guy and he was really hardcore. And that's where my hardcore mentality came to is from that point as well. And so, dealing with all that as a kid, I just felt like stories. It's hard to explain, but like tears are falling in my eyes and it felt like words. It felt like stories, but it was good because there was these things that were coming out of me that only this situation could have gotten out of me.
So God's dealing with you through the situation big time.
On more things, on lots of different areas. But again, I'm not putting it together. So I'm dealing with all this stuff. And that's when we basically, we ended up, I was filing for divorce. There was no way. She's done. Like I have a daughter. This is the worst thing that could ever happen. I thought I would never be divorced. I always thought we'd be a family, but you know what? I'm not going to deal with this disrespect.
Sure.
We're done. And so I basically told her, and with the words I used to use back then, like I said, it wasn't good. And basically I got her out of the apartment. I said, I'll take care of my daughter 100%. We'll figure out how we're going to work that out. We're going to make this work, but you're getting an apartment. I got her apartment. I kept the house. We were distant. It was bad. It wasn't good at all. And then we just started, basically, from there, the story would probably flip over to her because there was a lot of issues where I was unforgiving. I was not going to forgive. She came to me as, I told you everything, forgive me. And I said, you know what? You deserve to die. You deserve not even be, I was very harsh with my words at that point in time. And then basically she would, a very important part of the story, because this shows the amazing mercy and just the grace of God with what she's going through on her end.
Yeah.
With just some of the, go ahead and with that night you took all that Xanax, and all that, that was
to back up, to the, like when we split, I had a client of mine that would come into the salon. We called her the crazy Jesus lady.
Oh, yeah, that's true about her, yeah.
And, I used to give my girls the lowdown when I'd see her in the book. Now, why I knew that, being that I was living in the world, obviously God was somewhere in me that I knew what my girls talked about, the way that they spoke to each other could not take place in front of this woman.
Oh, okay. That's why it was a big deal whenever she came.
So I'd say, listen, girls, like...
She was the crazy Christian lady.
Diane is coming in today. I do not want to hear about who you were with last night, what you were doing. Do not use foul language, blah, 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 blah. Because I do not want to hear this woman right now at this point in time in my life.
Okay.
Yeah, I was not up for the sermon because we were split up. I was still working. So she came in and she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing." She's like, "There's something wrong because you're off." And I'm like, "No." And she's like, "Okay, well, I'll be here for a while if you want to talk to me about it." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So I started telling her what had happened or whatever. And
wait, you opened up right away?
Yeah, because like I didn't have anybody to talk to.
Oh, wow.
Like, I was basically alone because when I came to my parents, I did come here. And they, at that point, they liked him, but they could do without him. Like they, for many years, it was kind of like, and they basically said, "Well, you did it."
Yeah.
So why, why are you so upset? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like I just made the biggest mistake of my life. Like, what do you mean?
Mhm.
Like I didn't realize.
Yeah.
And, and that's what I told my mom, like, hey, I mean, I didn't realize, like, I really love him. Like, I messed up. Like, what am I going to do? And at that point, it was nothing. So my friend, my client, she said, have you ever accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior? And at this time, I was so broken, I didn't even know what that meant,
Mhm.
And I said, no. I mean, I went down to the Catholic Church a few nights ago with my daughter for the first time, but no, and she's like, she goes, well, do you want to do that? And I'm like now? She's like, I'm like, not in front of like all these people, She goes, well, we can go in the back. So I'm like, okay. So I go in the back of my color room at the salon and I say this prayer. I don't even know what it meant.
Right.
Honestly, she didn't really explain it. It was just basically like, hey, you're going to say this and, and you're forgiven. And I had to walk that out for a lot of years. Like, it just doesn't work like that for somebody, And I never even really remembered that, really, honestly, for much years later. And I remember looking at him one night and I went, hey, wait, I got saved, once I figured out what that meant, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So even if you don't know what you're saying, God knows what you're saying, and he reveals it later on.
Your heart was open. Yeah, your heart was open right there. You were broken. You're like, hey, come on, woman. I don't even know if you say you have something to help me, I will. Let's go in the back. And that's the amazing mustard seed faith.
Jesus was my last option when he should have been my first, but I didn't know that. For me, I feel like we raise our kids a little bit differently than what either one of us were raised. I always knew God loved me. My parents were very good at, making sure that I knew God was real, but we just didn't walk it out that much. Yeah. But with our kids, they know Jesus is the first option. We don't go to any other option but him first, and
so the way we got here, though, is I wanted you to explain that the two traumatic pieces that you could have ended.
Yeah. So she says to me before she leaves, because I explained to her, like, I felt like I just didn't want to be here anymore.
Okay.
So she's like freaking out, thinking I'm going to kill myself, But to me, at that point in time, I accepted Christ, and I didn't even know what that meant. So that really meant nothing to me. That sounds bad, but
you didn't know what it meant.
Right. I didn't know what it meant. And so she's calling me like every hour, this lady.
Like she's calling
because I gave her my number. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So she's calling my cell phone and I just keep hitting it like off. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I picked up the phone. And she says, hey, would you and your daughter like to go to church with me? And I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do? What did I do? Because she's persistent.
I can tell.
Like, she is very persistent. And I said yes, not because I wanted to go to church, but because I wanted her to stop calling me and leave me alone. And I went to church that Sunday with her, and I really liked it. I can remember going into the Christian Center bathroom. He was calling the phone, seeing where I was at with her, and told him I'm at church. He's like, what? And I said, I'm at church. And I said, Gemma really likes it. Like, they have like a kids' church. Like, I'm going to start coming. He's like, yeah, you friggin' need to go to church. I'm like, yeah, I know, and he like hung up and I went back out and Pastor John was the thing. Every single thing that he was saying, I got mad at the woman that brought me because I thought she told him what was happening. And then he had an altar call for prayer. I don't know what that meant. She literally drug me down the aisle by my hand. And she's like, I felt like everybody was looking at me. And she's like, right here, she's going through a lot. She really needs prayer. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
So everything that we tell people not to do is what she was doing.
Yes,
but it worked.
No,
yeah.
but honestly, for somebody like me, that's what had to happen, because I would have never walked up there to get prayer. Like, I literally had to be drugged down the aisle, and that's the truth. But after that, it still wasn't good.
Right.
It still wasn't easy, because I was going to church, and he had no clue to any of this until like marriage counseling. But I was so broken, you know, even after I got saved, even after I attended a church service, I was just having very bad anxiety being away from him, like being away from her. It's like all I knew. And so I called up my friend and I said, hey, can I have some of your anxiety medicine? And she's like, no.
This is not the same friend that brought you to church.
No, not the same friend that brought me to church. Hey, you never know. But
Jay's trying to cross his teeth, dot his eyes for this podcast.
Another friend of mine had anxiety medicine, and she's like, "Yes, you know, I can give you some or whatever." Well, she says to me stupidly, and she would tell you even to this day, it was her dumbest thing she's ever done in her life, given the state that I was in. She was getting a refill, and she had a whole bottle, and then her refill was due because she didn't take them all the time. So I took the whole bottle with me, and that night I took the entire bottle.
And that's how many pills roughly?
Probably like 40 maybe.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of medicine.
Oh yeah, it's a really.
I mean, if you look up Xanax too, all the people here, you know, listen to this podcast, go look up what, you know, 1 or 2 Xanax. I mean, this is the miracle conversation here. You know, that my goodness, that would kill a horse.
She was with him, and I was in the apartment all by myself.
So Gemma, your daughter was with Jay during this time.
Okay. Yeah, no, and
the people that are listening can't see where you're pointing, so that's why I'm just clarifying that. Yeah, that's okay.
So I woke up the next day and I looked around and I said, "You've got to be kidding me. I can't even kill myself, right?"
So you intended to kill yourself?
Oh, yes, I 100% intended to kill myself. And I thought, well, ain't this some crap? Like, I don't want to be here. It was the worst feeling of like the worst hangover. Yeah. I mean, I felt dead. I did feel dead, but I'm like, am I dead or am I not dead? Yeah. Like, cause that's how I felt, but I was very much still alive. And, I went on, you know, to tell my friend. She's like, oh my gosh, because my friend during that period of time, she was all I had. And she was literally there for me like nobody. It was crazy because she was talking to him and she was trying to help us, you know, and she wasn't a Christian either, but she was a very good person. And like, she did a lot for me during that time, even with helping with her. But then a few weeks later, he was having a get together at our house, our home that we had shared. And he asked me to come to get her. Okay. You know, and then when I went to get her, he was like, well, I mean, if you want to stay, like, you can. And I'm like, okay. Because at that point, I just wanted to be around him. I didn't even care if he was mean to me. I just wanted to be around him. But he kind of said some things in front of some people that were there and kind of like shamed me and kind of like embarrassed me. And so.
And I don't remember this part. I mean, that part, but this part I do. But yeah, the shaming her, I don't remember that. And I would never do it again. I'm sorry for that.
Well, yeah, but like I tell you, Jolin 2021 is different from Jolin 2006. Yeah. Yeah. No, but I went and got his loaded 9mm out of his drawer and went out the back door, told Jem stay, you know, in the house. And we had a garage that like kind of overlooked the town. And to get out this back door, and the reason why I went out there, she can't open it.
Okay.
She was only 4 at the time.
Right.
And she could never open it. It like caught.
Yeah.
So you had to like literally lift up and.
It was a trick door.
Yeah, it was a trick door. So I knew she wasn't going to come out the back door.
And she always knew never to go out the door because we lived in Charleroi. That you know, there's people. So she was kind of really on defense. If someone knocked on the door, she was like, okay, who is it? You know, dad, or someone at the door. You know, so it wasn't like she was never. So that was kind of ironic. But this is part of the story, though.
I went up in the garage and I went clean back into the garage where you couldn't see me, you know, and got on my knees and I prayed and I asked for forgiveness, which I've never really done. I didn't even know really what that meant, even after going to church, you know. I didn't know what that meant. And I put the gun in my mouth and had my finger on the trigger, and she comes out the back door that she never could open and says, "Mom, where are you?" And literally I had to turn because it was in and it was ready to go off. And so everybody says, like, as far as suicide goes, and this is one of the biggest things, like somebody that's telling you they're going to kill themselves, that's really a kind of a cry for somebody to help them. Most people, even from my experience, won't say anything. Nobody knew that I was there, you know, that I was to the point where I was going to kill myself. So people always say, like, oh, you know, that's the most selfish thing you could have did. You know, you have a daughter that needed you. Well, at that time, you're not thinking. And it is selfish to a point, but you're so mentally broken and your thought processes are not right that in my mind, from what he was telling me about myself and not having forgiveness towards me, I was a terrible role model for her, you know, and I felt like she would be better off with just him, you know? So
wow.
It wasn't.
That had to weigh on you a lot. That had to be like.
Oh yeah, it still weighs on me.
Yeah, and it's crazy too because when you look at it and you hear a story and all this, you know, there's that true spiritual battle. You know, Ephesians 6:12. You know, where we don't wrestle against that flesh and blood. You know, it's that thing that was speaking to her. Go, dude. You know, whatever. You'd be better off. You know, so that's a really good story for people to realize you're getting caught up more than just this physical. Yeah. There's a definitely a heaven and a hell that are fighting over you.
Battle for sure.
So, you know, God's fighting for you as much as the enemy's trying to hammer you.
So you had the pistol in your mouth. You're ready to pull the trigger.
It was a 9mm, yes.
And then you hear your daughter calling for you. And she couldn't normally get out there, nor would she get out there.
Never.
But this time she was led out there. And I'm sure looking back, you know that this was,
was
God
definitely
just let her.
God.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
What happened next? Like
after I got it slowly away from me and like pulled my finger out, which it never went off. She come in the garage. She opened the door and she came in. She's like, "Hi, Mom. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, nothing. How'd you get out here?" I opened the door. I'm like, "Okay." And she said, "Do you want to come back down?" And I said, "Okay, I'm coming." And I went in and I went to our dresser and I put it right back where he had it. And he didn't know this until we started counseling. And that really threw him for a loop.
So when did the counseling start?
Oh, well, so shortly after that, I had text messaged him and said, "Hey, can I'm going to drop Gemma off after church. We're going to go to church." And he was like, "Okay." Well, I was coming out of my apartment and she says, "Hey, there's Daddy." And I said, I was annoyed.
Right.
Because I wanted to take her to church and I thought he was going to give me a hard time about her not going, you know? And he came up to the window and he said, "Can I go with you?" And I looked at him and I said, "Go with me where?" He goes, "To church." And Gemma's in the back going, yeah, Daddy, let's go to church. And I'm like, now what am I going to do? He purposely said it in front of her because he knew she was going to be like, "Yay, everybody's going to church."
Yeah.
So I said to him, I remember I was driving and I said to him, "Isn't this something?" He goes, what? I said, we're literally walking into church, divorced with our daughter. What are we going to tell people? We're divorced and we rode the church as a family.
You're divorced at this time.
Oh, yes, we're divorced. Yeah.
Okay.
And he goes, I mean, why do they got to ask? I'm like, I don't know if it's a thing. I don't know if they're going to ask, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, these people.
You guys,
I said, I got drugged to the altar the last time I was here. Like, I don't know what they're going to do. Like, you know, they could perform an exorcism on us next or something.
Goodness.
And so we went, and he just kept coming, and we kept coming every Sunday together. And, you know, we were trying to work on things. And finally, Pastor John said, you know, why don't you guys think about starting some marriage counseling? I said, sure. We went in and met with Pastor John, and he said, you know what? This is a little much for me. I'm going to give you to Tim and Paige.
and Pastor John has been a pastor for a very long time at that point.
Yeah, well, even if you ask Pastor Tim, he said, if you ask him on a scale of 1 to 10, he says a 25 is how bad it was.
Yeah.
But we started with Tim and Paige, and, you know, Pastor Tim said, hey, you know, you guys should really think about getting married again, you know, and we're like, you know, and he was kind of like, I mean, yeah, sure. You know, mind you, I'm pregnant.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of happened in between all this with Gavin. And so he says, well, do whatever you need to do. Like, how do we get that process started? Pastor Tim says, you got to call the courthouse. Get a copy of your divorce decree and apply for a new marriage license. So this was after church.
Okay.
On a what were we at the church for? After counseling one night. It was like a Wednesday or something.
It's been so long.
Yeah.
And we were there for a counseling early on, and the courthouse is still open. So I call. And the woman says, okay, what's the name on the divorce decree?
Right.
And I said, Gilbert J. Morris and Jolin V. Morris. And she goes, okay, and what's the new name going on the new marriage license? And I say, Gilbert J. Morris and Jolin V. Morris. She goes, no, the marriage license. I said, yeah, it's the same name. She said, hold on, I'm going to have to transfer you. And I said, they don't even want to talk to us. I said, she's probably whatever. So this guy gets on the phone and he says, hello, ma'am. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you were transferred to me about your marriage license. I said, yeah. He said, if I got this correctly, are you remarrying the same person? I said, yes. And he said,
so you didn't just find somebody with the exact same name to save on the monogramming.
Yeah.
Okay,
and so he said, do you believe in God?
Now, meanwhile, think about that. State, you're talking to state. That's not normal. You don't say that. You separate, you know, that stuff.
Yeah.
So, and I said, well, at this time I said, actually, yes, I do. I'm a newly saved Christian. And I start giving him basically my testimony that he probably didn't want to hear the whole story for. And the thing, he said, well, I got some news for you. Out of all of the divorces signed on this day, the judge didn't sign yours. Send in $10 and I'll take it out of the system. So we were never even divorced.
So you just thought that you were divorced this whole time?
Well, no, we got a paper in the mail.
You got a paper in the... Okay, so...
Go ahead. It had to go from...
Yeah, so basically, I mean, I got the paper that said that it was finalized. I remember getting it at the house when she was at the apartment, and I remember it delivered to the house at my mailbox. And I remember going, I'm going, yes. And I'm like, oh, man, this is terrible. Like, golly, how am I in this position? Like, I didn't ever think I was going to be divorced. But at the same time, I'm thinking, I got this new life of, bachelor, but no, I don't want that. So that's not to go get another girl, woman to marry. Like, that's not, that makes no sense. So I just remember being, oh, this stinks, man. How did I get in this position? But anyways, we get this information and we're kind of blown away.
And we're like, wow. Blown away. You know what his words were? It wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is such a God moment. He says, well, then where in the heck's my $1,000 that I paid to get a divorce from you? That wasn't the romantic response at the moment.
Yeah. So let's fast forward. So all this stuff goes good. Okay. So that was
so you guys great. At that point, you realize that you're still married legally.
Yeah.
And it was actually kind of like a miracle to the point. I remember feeling something, you know, but then I remember
I hope you felt something.
Yeah. It was good. I was like, okay, maybe God's doing something here. But so I remember Pastor Tim asking me, it was about a couple years later, year ago.
Speaking of men's
year and a half, year?
Like
a couple years, a year. He goes, hey, Jay, you mind telling your testimony in front of about 100 men at and meanwhile, like public speaking for me, even though I'm an entrepreneur, it's always been a fear of mine.
Sure.
So I'm like, oh gosh, but I know I know Pastor Tim, and I know he hears from the Holy Spirit. Yep. So I'm denying God. I'm not even thinking I'm denying him. I'm denying God's.
Yeah. Tim's one of those guys that's like whenever he speaks, it's like God speaks.
Yeah, because I know
it's in my life too.
Yeah, and I know you guys are praying and before everything, and I trust that. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I got to say yes. So I say, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And I didn't care about telling people about my wife cheating on me and this and that. I had to be a man and all. I had no problem with that because I think that was really important. But so anyways, I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I'm sitting about 2 days before I get ready to go to this men's breakfast. I'm in my office in one of my pawn shops. And God hits me with this ton of information, which I never heard God's voice audible, but this was just information of not even thinking about anything, just I'm doing what I'm doing. It was like, boom. And he was like, and God said this to me in information. He said, I know that you've always doubted this divorce or however it's said, because it's been a long time since I even told this story because it's not too fresh on my mind, but it went like, basically he said, I want to explain to you, and I need you to understand this because the men that you're going to speak to need to hear this, the miracle how powerful I am. Mm-hmm. So basically it went from him telling me how the process, okay, so you got this divorce and this paper actually got signed by the judge. Okay, so I'm like, all right. Mm-hmm. So the paper goes to a secretary. The secretary's got to look at this and compute it back in the computer. Mm-hmm. And so that computer now has to, be in reference of a printer. Okay. So now the printer's got to recognize this thing. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we got this big process going, right?
Sure.
So he's showing me this process. So the piece of paper.
That's one thing about government. There's paperwork for everything.
Yeah. And it's just not the judge says so, boom, Mm-hmm. So basically that piece of paper comes out. They have to now sign it and do all this and seal it and then put it in an envelope and then send it out to you. And that was the same day when you said you were happy but then sad that you got and you knew it was finalized. It was finalized paper. And you remember that opening it up. And I was like, yeah. And then so he reflects me. He goes, how do you think if the secretary would have not seen the judge's, whatever. I mean, she's not going to make it up. She's just doing her job.
Right.
So and basically it was, the judge did sign the paper. The paper went to the secretary. The secretary did what the judge told her to do, which this is a divorce. Sure. It's final. I got the paper. Mm-hmm. And then God said, listen, it doesn't matter. I do anything I want to do. I erased the judge. I erased the stuff in the computer. I did all this. That's why when you guys called up the courthouse and they said, well, hey, I mean, for whatever reason, a judge never signed your thing. Oh yeah, he did sign it, but God reversed it. He took it because because this is deep, because if it wasn't signed, the secretary would have never printed it out and sent it to me.
Yeah.
So she saw this judge's signature. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's crazy. But then that guy on the end, when she's talking to him, says, well, the judge never signed it.
Do you believe in God?
Yeah. If you believe in God, judge never signed it. So it's just, yeah.
And so you were asked to share this testimony.
Yes.
To all these guys.
Yep. And it was awesome. It was really it was a pivotal moment in my life too, because I got to public speak in front of people, and that was cool because I really always wanted to be a public speaker. Just the fear,
right?
Fears me. So, but yeah, it was great. It was amazing. It changed people's lives that day. People would come up to me, and go, "Man, you helped me out." I'm like, yeah, not me, but God, But yeah, that's kind of how it went. Yeah. So
you guys thought you were divorced. You were divorced. God miraculously removes the judge's signature and starts all this, basically these dominoes start falling, and it's like, you don't need to get remarried because you are married. And that's just amazing how God worked that out. So how did your faith then grow at that point? Because when I met you guys, I remember you being like, I knew that you were young Christians. You didn't know the Lord very long at that point, but you were both very hungry for the things of the Lord. You loved worship, especially whenever I would lead worship at the little small group there, and a couple of songs. Actually, for Christmas, the one year I made you a CD of me doing the one song, "Let My Words Be Few."
Yes.
Yeah,
That's my favorite.
So tell me, like, what is God doing in your lives now?
Well, I mean, it's been a roller coaster with COVID and all that. We know all that. But yeah, I mean, we always come back to, it's always, we've tried to really figure out through our walk. It's hard to walk, especially in a family of four.
Mm-hmm.
And the issues of the world and everything, and you feel like you're just never good enough, or you're not doing enough, and your kids aren't going to be, and it's like I had to come to the groups of I need God's grace in my life, and to the point where it's like I don't hit bullseye, but in that, it's there's been a rest as well. But I mean, we're still going forward with our businesses, mm-hmm. and we're our kids wrestle. Our daughters play volleyball, and Gemma's also, in social media. She's getting ready to graduate here soon, and so she wants to kind of get in that social media and influencer stuff like that. But and then Jolin's wanting to get back with a hair salon, which we recently just put our living room and made it into a business, which we'll show you here in a little bit, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so we're kind of like, it's almost like we're just we've always moved forward.
So forgiveness and grace is a big, big theme of what we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
And without God's forgiveness and without grace towards each other, without forgiveness towards each other, we wouldn't be where we are today. And, as I said earlier, you guys have 4 kids that love Jesus. And what advice would you give to somebody that you're like, if you're ministering to somebody that is going through something, whether it be a broken relationship or something that just seems impossible without God's grace and forgiveness? What would you say to that person that really needs to hear the words of God?
Well, I can go reflect back on the story that when we were, probably 30 minutes before this, is when she had her hair salon. I had my pawn shop. Okay. Bringing back the woman that we called, she called the crazy Christian lady. Mm-hmm. Well, that woman, my shop was actually right across the street from the hair salon. So she comes in my shop, and this changed my life. This is what I would say to answer your question. This is what I would say to someone, because this is where the rubber met the road for me. This was the aha moment that I knew I had a really big issue and a really big problem, and I didn't know how to solve it. And the question she asked me was, "What makes you better than God?" And I remember I grew up in the Catholic Church, so I was very like, "Oh, don't say that," Like I remember 666 when I was growing up. Like I don't even want to look at that. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll turn into a demon or whatever. I was a very religious spirit, I guess you could say. So when she said that, it was like kind of shocking. And I was like, "Oh no, I don't think that." She goes, "Well, you must think that because Jesus has forgiven your wife for everything she's done, but you haven't forgiven your wife." And I'm telling you, J. Matt, it was like, I felt like this, and it was like, you ever see those grand openings lights at like a car dealership? Yeah, sometimes you can see them at nighttime, and it was like that. Didn't see it, but it was like that went into my soul. I don't even know where my soul is at this point in time, right? I'm not even a saved Christian. At least I don't think I was. I guess maybe I was, but anyways, I remember I knew whether. Like, I just knew I had an issue, and I felt like it was like, if I don't forgive, I might go to hell. I felt this experience. I didn't even know what hell was. It wasn't even a concern of mine, could care less. Sure. And I felt like maybe I might not make it into heaven because of this situation. So I had a deal. I'm like, how am I going to forgive my wife? I mean, I don't even like her at this point. I don't know. That's why she tried to kill herself those 2 times, because of the things that came out of my mouth were that toxic.
Wow.
So like but I remember it was a pivotal moment. And then you know what? It was actually fast forwarding back to where I'm at today and before today. But I realized that the forgiving people, forgiving others, it is a necessity for God to be able to do the miracles. It's up to you and that other person. If we're speaking about marriage here, because a lot of marriages we do minister to, it's like one person forgives, but the other one doesn't. Well, you have nothing then, because it was a point in time where my obedience, she already wanted my forgiveness. That's why she came out and told me the truth. I didn't have to find out. And that was a miracle in itself that she told me and I didn't have to find out. But then there was me that was like, I'll never, ever forgive you. But that was the pivotal moment when that woman said that. And I said, man, I have an issue here and I have to forgive, even if we never got married again or whatever. I'm not even thinking about but I have to, the hatred that was in my heart and the feelings I had towards her and people that were involved and all that, I had a really bad hell-bounded possibly issue. I just knew this. I don't even know how I knew it. But I would say for anyone that's going through anything hard, whether it's marriage, friendships, whatever it may be, the only roadblock in your life, and it only hurts you, is that you haven't forgiven that person, because that's the only thing that will constantly come up in your life that you don't understand why you can't go forward. What's wrong with me? What I don't understand what's going on in this world. It really, if you reflect back at what you have in your life that you have not forgiven, and it could be someone that's done wrong to you that they don't even deserve forgiveness possibly, but at the same time they do deserve it. One, to free yourself, and the other that God said, hey, listen, they came to me and asked me for forgiveness, which you don't know this story about them. So what makes you better than me? And that's the scary part, where a lot of people, I think, are hanging in their life, that they're portraying that they're better than God, which not directly, but indirectly, they don't realize that spiritual battle is what's happening. And their life's falling apart in some areas because of unforgiveness. So yeah, forgive those who have done you wrong. And I'm not saying you can do it like, oh, I'm just going to do it. It takes time. It takes thought. It takes days, weeks, months, maybe.
It takes a consistent choice.
Yes, a choice. And choices are not fun. To make any choices, sometimes they're not easy. So yeah, that would be my wisdom and everything going through all this, and not only wisdom, it's just the truth. It's the word of God's truth that if you want to, and the other thing too, I remember scripture hit me. It's like, if you want to be forgiven, you must forgive. That was another thing that plagued me. I don't even know how I even got to that scripture, but I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble, and it's true. It's like, if you want to be forgiven, you must forgive.
Right.
So that's it, man. That's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. What advice would you give, Jolin?
For me, obviously everything he said is true. And that's how I view things as well. But a lot of people, I think, get caught up in, how do you know if it's God or not? If I should forgive this person, or if I'm being set up. And now, don't get me wrong. If you were, sexually abused by your father, raped, terrible things, you can forgive that person, but that doesn't mean you have to have a relationship with that person. So I think a lot of times people that are going through the process of forgiveness kind of think, hey, just because I forgive them, like now I need to let them back into my life. And that's not always the case. Right. But as far as our situation or a married situation, there's nothing that God can't restore if both people are willing to restore. And it's not a comfortable process. And
doesn't sound like it.
They always say, how do you know if it's God? And for me, it's uncomfortable. If I'm uncomfortable, it's probably most definitely God. Because when you're going through life and you're comfortable, you're not even really giving God a thought.
Yeah.
It's kind of just life and the way it is. But that moment comes where you're standing in the middle of a grocery aisle and there's someone there crying. You're uncomfortable because now you're like, okay, here I am, a complete stranger. Now I'm going to go ask this person if they're okay. Now God's going to have me talk to them. Now I'm going to pray with them. That was early on. To me now, as a, definitely I haven't arrived as a
we none of us have.
I'll arrive when I reach the gates. Yeah. But, now it's a lot easier for me, that I've been a Christian for so long. To me, it is nothing to walk up to somebody in need, or even just to start talking to somebody in general. But yeah, I think, it's good to get uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You grow when you're uncomfortable. Early on as a Christian, those encounters,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and there's just little things that, even just Pastor John speaking too of, don't go the other way if you see somebody.
Yeah.
I can remember before, I became a Christian, I'd see somebody like, oh, and like trying to go around them, but when I tried to do it as a Christian and Pastor John used to laugh, I would do it and then they would meet me on the other side anyways, and you're like, oh, you can't get away from it. You can't outrun God is basically the point,
true. Yeah. So as we've been talking about your stories, there's a lot of things and how God just has interwoven your stories. Even when you tried to pull it apart, God has been the one that's obviously kept you guys together.
Absolutely.
And for his glory, for his purpose. And that's so God. That's so cool about how he does that. And, I love asking these questions, where along your journey do you see now that you look back that your heart was burning, but you didn't realize that it was Jesus causing it to burn during that time? And I can pick out a couple different ones throughout the stories that you just told, but I want to hear from you. Just what's one of those moments where your heart was just burning and you didn't realize it, but now you look back and you're like, that's it. I get it now.
I would say for me, are you saying burning as that?
Isn't like God's trying to get your attention?
Oh yeah.
Like he's with you and you just didn't realize it.
Yeah. I would say the biggest, man, it's been so many times too. I mean, and even in this story, we could just base off this story, but my whole entire life, just from being saved from major car accidents and jail time and everything, aha moments like that. And it's like, but I would say with this story, it would be with that woman coming into me in my pawn shop. It would be the moment that I was going down the West Virginia area, and then all of a sudden it's like, she comes in the middle of my mind where she hadn't been in my mind for 2 years. Like, where does that come from? And then you look back and, you're like, oh man, I'm glad that, I actually went through with all these things, and another aha moment looking back now, even doing this podcast, would be when I got saved at the altar with my aunt. You look at that and you look at everything, and it kind of almost like established itself that it's these little things that just keep on happening to us. And I mean, another one obviously was when she called the courthouse. Another aha moment. Right. I'm sitting at my desk before the men's breakfast thing, and God said, "Hey, I need you to know the truth of this because I need you to." There was aha moments all the time. But those are some of my biggest highlighted ones that I know God was with me. Now that I look back, sometimes I didn't know he was with me, but when it's all said and done, where I stand today, I look at all those moments. I'm like, wow, that was God. But, kind of like, did I know I was walking with God the moment that Christian woman told me? Nope, I didn't. I missed it. But that was something I could know 100% was him.
What about you, Jolin? Where was your heart burning within you that you didn't realize it until you look back?
I have a lot of those moments, but definitely, probably, I would say my heart was burning before. I guess you look at it as like your mind's not there, but your heart is there. I guess it would be when I got saved in the back of my salon when I didn't even realize what I had done.
Yeah.
But that a few years later, that was an aha moment for me. Like, and
it's definitely an along the way moment for sure.
Yeah. And I look back at like those times, like when we were first saved, you're really on fire once you have those aha moments. And I think back of even now, when I look back, there was just a special, that time in our life, even though it was so terrible, was just a really special time in our life of friends that we met, at the church, like you and Chobi and, Simeon and Joyce and just even Tim and Paige, like that was our family, and that time is so almost sacred to us. Like, just that's where we grew.
Yeah.
And just surrounding ourselves with other believers. And there's times where I even now say to him, like, I just miss that. Like, just it was a different type of feeling. Mm-hmm. And as you go on, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, as you go on and walk with Christ, how do you keep that burning? Mm-hmm. Because that's a good question. Yeah. Because that burning desire when you first get saved dwindles down as you become more, I guess, knowledgeable in the things of God, and more, life changes. It's something you get older.
Yeah, it's something that you always need to be adding fuel to the fire too.
Yeah. But it's like I want to feel like that again. Yeah. How do I get there? Because I don't want to get broken again to get there. I wouldn't change anything that had happened. I mean, I wish it wouldn't happen, but at the same time, we wouldn't be nowhere near where we are now in our marriage. And, it's not perfect. Mm-hmm. It's just two people that have to continually, try and have God be at the head of it. Yeah. But yeah, I always look for my aha moment is that feeling.
Yeah.
I would say the time Gemma came out too. That's a heck of an aha moment, looking back, like, why did she touch that door? How did she get it open? Yeah. What made her go out there? She knew not to go out. Like, she was never a person to just say, oh, I wonder if she knew there could be a robber on the other side, or there'd be a person on the other side. I mean, we're living in Charleroi. You just don't open the door. Yeah, you just, and so for her to do that, that's I look back for myself. That's like a wow. Like, wow.
God was definitely in that.
Yep.
And Jolin, I'm going to start with you for this last question here. If you could go back in time and visit young Jolin, teenage Jolin, or whatever point in your timeline that you would like to say, you like to smack yourself upside the head and say, here's some information, here's some advice that you need to know for right now. What's going on in your life at that point, and what would you say to yourself?
Even if I could go back and tell her what she should do, she would have never listened anyways. But so obviously it would be, you probably should listen, but I guess I always had an abandonment issue. I think now that I can look back, with my real father, just being a drug addict and, trying to, that's a whole other podcast for you as far as my childhood story. I definitely think it could help a lot of people with what I've been through as a child. But I guess I would just tell her it's going to be okay. Definitely follow after Christ. That, that's what was missing. I think, as a young girl, I had an acceptance issue. Yeah. Even though, I wasn't, I didn't have a lot of friends, mainly because of my own attitude. I just didn't care about anything really back then. And it's not that my parents tried to talk to young Jolin, but you could even ask her now. There was no talking to me. I see bits and pieces of that in my own daughter.
Okay.
Which I get her.
Yeah.
I think God allowed me to go through the things that I went through and to be that person that I can give her a lot more grace and forgiveness with some of the things that she, is encountering, just because she's me. Like, when I look at her, I'm like, oh my, but she's me with Jesus. So that's the kicker, I would just say that it's going to be okay. And, to have a better attitude with things in life. Mm-hmm. And,
Yeah. What about you, Jay? What would you go back and tell young Jay?
Well, I was thinking about that the whole time she was speaking, and I'm trying to really put it all together. And I'm thinking, like, I don't know. I don't know if I would. I mean, obviously, all my issues of who I who I, all the mistakes and stuff. That's how I became where I'm at today. So I think there's always this issue until you touch the stove, because it's hot, right? Don't touch the stove. It's hot.
Right.
Until you touch the stove, it's like you kind of just didn't realize it was hot. So like for me, I don't know. I look at my life, and I obviously didn't do everything perfect in a way, but I don't know if I really have too many regrets, to be honest with you. I don't know.
What advice would you just give yourself? Because I know that we can't go back in time, and the things that we've gone through have really made us who we are, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
But if you could go back and tell yourself, hey, here's a lesson that we don't need to do this to learn.
Yeah. I would say I think I dropped the ball a lot just by being impatient. Like if I could tell myself to be more patient, stick with, some of the sports that I've done and stuff I enjoyed. And for some reason, like I would just give up on them and just move on. And like never had that persistence and consistency of anything per se. And I don't know why. Like, I look back at myself and I'm like, man, I could have been something when it came to some serious sports, the levels I were at some sports. And I'm like, but always for some reason, and I don't know if it was, maybe my parents didn't push me enough. And then I look back at myself, I'm like, okay, but I don't really want to be a pushy parent either. And not have that relationship with my kids. So I would say that, man, persistence and consistency of just sticking in things that are good for you, and then and the things that aren't good for you. Like, don't be so persistent, consistent with that. Like, why is that? Like, that makes no sense. Like, the stuff that's good for you, you kind of boom. The stuff that's not good for you, that's like seems a little bit more like, yeah, I like that. Let me just stick with it. And it's like, stay away from all the stuff that life throws at you that says that this will make you feel better or be better, or, whatever it may be. It's
I gotcha.
Yeah. Just persistence and consistency on positive things, and follow after your goals and dreams, and don't get down and desperate and do whatever you do to get away from that, because life's hard. Even if you're doing something you love to do.
Right.
You ain't listen, man. The problem with society, the problem with me back then is, it's like a fast food mentality. You go through the drive-through, you order what you want, you get it, right? Yeah. You want something right now, you got no groceries, so you can go get a full load of groceries within an hour. Everything is like that in life. And so, yeah, I think we just got to wait. And here's the biggest thing. I always think about this all the time. It's like, okay, who gets on a roller coaster ride, gets on it? And I always picture the Steel Phantom going up that big thing. And it's amazing. You can look out of all Pittsburgh and see it all, right?
Yeah.
But who puts their head between their legs and misses that? And then they go the whole ride, right? But then there's something that happens at the end of that ride where they feel accomplished and it was good. And I really liked it. I think I really enjoyed this, but then all of a sudden you can't tell me anything about it. And that's your life. So your life, everything, and it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of why your podcast, that's how I view life. Like, but then there always that person will go, I'd like to go back on that ride again, possibly, or maybe I should. And then you get back at the end of the exit and you realize you got 4-hour wait. So you never go on it again. But that's kind of like I look like you got to look at your life and even in the good and the bad, just accept it all. But like in those things, like enjoy the ride as well. Because if you don't enjoy the ride, you're going to miss everything that you have become, what you become. And then you're going to only focus on that fast food mentality. I want this now. I want that now. And all of a sudden you missed out all the other things that created your character to become who you were. And that could be you miss your family because you work too much, whatever it may be.
That's why I am doing this podcast, because I want to learn from other people's stories, other people's journeys about where your hearts were burning, where you can look back and you say, Jesus really was walking with me. And, when we're aware of Jesus involved in our lives at that moment, it's easier to stop and smell the roses, because Jesus made the roses and he wants you to pay attention to them. And, as you were talking about the whole roller coaster thing, I'm over here kind of laughing because Jolin obviously doesn't like roller coasters at all. So she was talking about, or she was, mentioning that she was
doing sign language.
Yeah, she was doing sign language, that she would be the one to put her head between her knees and stuff like that. But
that's me. We're opposites. So that's why we're opposites in a lot of ways, and a lot of ways not. Yeah. But I mean, I was sitting here thinking, well, another thing would be, don't let people hold you back from your dreams or your goals and what you want to do. No matter what people say or what people, discourage you from, because you'll be, my age, 42 before you know it. And I had this realization the other day. I said to him, we were in bed, and I said, do you realize something? My dream was I wanted to go to the Army, and I wanted to be a police officer. And I looked at him in bed the other day. I said, do you realize that I'm never going to be a police officer? He goes, yeah. And I said, no, like seriously, like I just had this epiphany that I am going to die never fulfilling what I wanted to do. I will never stop our daughter or our kids from, if they have these crazy, wacky ideas of what they're going to do, because some of Gemma's ideas are pretty out there, you know, that I'm not going to be that mom that's, oh, I don't want you to do that. You know, no, I'm worried. I'm going to be worried, but I don't want her to be my age, laying in bed, middle-aged with your husband saying, I'm going to die and never be a police officer. He's like,
well, God is a redeemer. He obviously through your story, he has redeemed quite a bit there. You know, sadly, he hasn't redeemed that whole police officer dream
I'm out
of yours.
Of shape,
but,
and I'm too old now. So yes, no.
But I'm sure with the 4 kids that you have, they feel like you're a police officer.
Well, I'm kind of like a police officer, yeah.
But you know, guys, it's been so good to be able to sit with you and to be able to share your story and to just. I'm realizing that I'm just so grateful that God has allowed our paths to cross when they did, and to cross again just recently. And so I just want to thank you guys for allowing me to join you along your way.
Yeah, we thank you too. We appreciate everything you do for us. And you've been a huge inspiration to us in our lives too, in our worst moments that you never even knew about. See?
Yeah.
Yeah. See?
Your song helped me through a lot. See, you didn't even know.
Yeah.
It was on repeat constantly.
Wow. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, J-Matt. We appreciate it, buddy.
I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Jay and Jolin Morris. I really want to encourage you again to take the time to forgive those who have wronged you today. Ask Jesus to show you how you can forgive them and who you need to forgive, even if it's yourself. Sometimes these broken relationships take a while to mend, but God isn't done with it yet. When you release forgiveness, you will experience a renewed grace in your life, and then you will be able to treat somebody else with respect and care and actually pray for them with a pure heart. You can see lives and relationships turned around as you trust the Lord. And maybe you will see an amazing thing happen, just like Jay and Jolin. I would love to hear how this episode and the things that we've talked about here has helped you. Please let me know by reaching out to me at johnalongtheway@gmail.com. Just email me. I would love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to Along the Way. If you've enjoyed joining me along my way, please share this with a friend who you think will be encouraged by this podcast. Also, please rate and review Along the Way on iTunes. That helps more people discover Along the Way. And subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and through my website, alongtheway.media. If you want to support me in this podcast, I also have a Patreon page. The link to become a supporter is also in my show notes. I hope that you've enjoyed this part of my journey, and may you realize when Jesus is walking with you along your way. Along the Way is honored to be part of the Charisma Podcast Network. You can find tons of spirit-filled content from their vast catalog of podcasts, including my Monday through Friday news stories from the Charisma News Podcast. Go to cpnshows.com to see the full list and latest episodes.